Mm-hmm. Very cool. Well, that'll be good. It'll be good for her to do that and to share her love with you, and to it's a nice connection.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, everyone.
Good
How
morning.
are we doing? I'm sorry, I just had to end the phone call. Ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum, bum, 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 bum. Okay, so how am I going to do this? How is everybody doing this morning?
Well, thank you.
Glad to see you.
Good to see you too.
Pretty good.
Okay, very good. Any news? Anything new with anybody? No?
Apparently not.
Um, Very good. I'm sorry. I had a phone call that went a little bit longer than I anticipated, so I wasn't able to pull up a story I was going to share with everyone. Oh, that's interesting. Sorry. So sorry. So I'm just looking to see if I can find it quickly. Huh. I might just have to tell you the story. We'll see. Oh, no, maybe here we go. Let me see. There we go. Okay. That could be helpful. Okay. This will work. Okay, so thank you for your patience. So last week, remember, we were talking about or we started exploring Rabbi Ben Zoma's teaching about 4 different spiritual virtues that we should strive for, and his somewhat novel interpretation of each of them. Right. So last week we were talking about. Last week it was a very lively conversation, right? That we spent all morning on, which was who is wise? One who learns from everyone. And we examined the verse from the Psalm that it's based on, and how Ben Zoma Rabbi Ben Zoma had a novel interpretation, kind of a novel expansion of the idea in the Psalm, which seemed to suggest that I've learned from all of my teachers, right? Which is already a pretty good step up, that we should be learning from all of our teachers. That's a great, I would feel myself successful if I'd gotten to that point in life, right? Where I could learn from all of my teachers. And Ben Zoma expands that to say we learn from the one who is wise is one who learns from everyone. And we were talking about the challenges that we face with that, and can we see that in a positive light? It's easy to interpret it in the negative, right? Of course, we learn from everyone. We learn from the people we like what to do, and we learn from the people we don't like what not to do, right? But we thought that was not quite I think we didn't express this explicitly, but I think we all thought that was not quite challenging enough of an interpretation, that really Ben Zoma was pushing us to learn even from, in a positive way, somehow, even from those we disagree with. And I challenged us all, imagining our politics somewhat not aligned exactly, but that we would all have a challenge to learn something from the people who are protesting the stay-at-home orders and all the things that the government's doing to keep us safe. And we were trying to imagine how could we learn positively from that, right? That was the arc of our class last time. And so today we go from wisdom to our inner drives, our instinct and our drive for pleasure, really. The focus is on our drive for pleasure. And in order to understand the Hebrew word that Ben Zoma is going to use when we get to the text, I wanted to look at one rabbinic explanation of what that word means so that we can kind of have that behind us. It's not the only one, but it's an important one, and it's also one that's somewhat well known, so I wouldn't be surprised if you've seen this before on some level or another, but I wanted everyone to have the same starting point. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with this teaching from Midrash on Bereshit chapter, well, it's from Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 9, Midrash 7. That really doesn't mean anything because the rabbis didn't organize it that way. That's how scholars organize them later on. So that's just a way to reference it. But I'm going to share that with you from Sefaria, and we'll start to get into the idea of what is this thing. Okay, so here we go. Does everybody see?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. I'm going to just go in order for reading. So, Carla Beth, could you read the first sentence for us? But you have to unmute yourself. Sorry.
There we go. Rabbi Naaman said.
Nachman. It's okay. Sorry.
Naaman said in Rabbi Samuel's name, "Behold, it was good," refers to the good desire, and "behold, it was very good" refers to the evil desire.
Okay, so let's understand what are they talking about? They are, here are the rabbis, and we're at the beginning of the book of Bereshit, of Genesis, and Rabbi Nachman is quoting his teacher, Rabbi Samuel or Rabbi Shmuel, asking when in the Torah, describing the days of creation, at the end of each of the days, at the end of each of the first 5 days, it says God calls it good, right? That it was good. And at the end of the 6th day, it says Hine Tov Me'od, behold, it was very good. And so they're asking the question, what does it mean that why this difference, and what do each of these mean? Okay? Okay, I want to continue on.
It only says very good after man was created with both the good and bad inclinations. In all other cases, it only says, and God saw that it was good. Can then
Okay. Right, so they're linking the difference between Tov, meaning good, and Tov Me'od, very good. And noticing that Tov Me'od is only said after the creation of humanity, of human beings. Right? So now, what questions might you have before we continue on? Is this a setup that you would have come to on your own, just reading it?
No.
No, right? Why not? What might, I mean, I don't say why not, but right? It's not what our expectation is. So it's kind of like a teaser, maybe a little bit, right? The rabbis are saying, they're trying to get us interested, or piquing our curiosity by putting out a proposition that is going to, until we learn it, challenge us and make us question and be curious, right? Okay, let's keep going.
Yes.
Can then the evil desire be very good? That would be extraordinary. But without the evil desire, however, no man would build a house, take a wife, and beget children. And thus said Solomon, again, I consider all labor and all excelling in work. That is a man's rivalry with his neighbor.
that it is a man's rivalry with his neighbor, right? So let's build backwards up. Let's take this verse from Kohelet, from Ecclesiastes. Can someone paraphrase it for us? I'll read it out again, and someone paraphrase it. Again, I considered all labor and all excelling in work, that it is a man's rivalry with his neighbor.
You wouldn't do anything unless you were pushed by your evil desire to compete.
Well, there is sort of a natural inclination for one-upmanship, and so that acts as an incentive to do these things that you might otherwise just let go by.
Okay, so Peter's pointing out that we have a natural instinct towards competition, which 100%, right? In fact, as I understand it, a lot of our understanding of happiness is based on not on a absolute scale, right? It's not like there are certain things that if you have them, they make you happy in terms of the material quality of life, but it's that how we perceive our life in comparison to those around us and those we're in community with. That has a bigger impact on our sense of happiness, right? So here Solomon, here Solomon, or King Solomon, in the book of Ecclesiastes is saying, right, that labor and excellence in work, right, getting not just hard work but really getting better at it, is caused by our rivalry with one another. Does that ring true?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so let's say why not. Margaret, was that you who said no?
Nope.
Oh, who said no?
I said no, but I'm not sure. I don't know how to do this thing. Am I on?
Oh yeah, we can hear you, Naomi. Can you if you look at the bottom of your screen,
I see it. I see it. Yes.
you can turn your video on.
Oh, well, because there are many good works that people do that are not just the result of envy, and there's compassion and there's love, and all these things have inspired a lot of
Mm-hmm.
activity.
Right, so there are positive things that encourage us to excel as well.
Yeah.
Okay. What else besides we have love, we have compassion. Here we have competitiveness. What are the other things that push us to excel or to work harder than perhaps necessary?
A virus.
A virus.
I mean, or the medical people are working much harder than they anticipated,
Yeah.
and also trying to figure out how they can conquer this.
For sure. Okay, so danger or challenge.
Right.
A sense of duty.
Responsibility.
A sense of satisfaction in seeing you create something, or the satisfaction that you get from a job well done.
Okay, satisfaction.
Should I chip in?
Yeah, Don.
Yeah, okay. So the problem I think that we all have here is the word all. I think it pertains to a lot of endeavors, but certainly not all.
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes to mind here, one of many, is survival. Okay. So if we go back to that era, building a house to, put a roof over your head, to grow crops in the field, I don't see those as being competitive, frankly. I see the motivation, as I said, being survival as one example of an exception to that generality, and particularly the use of the word all.
Well, let me challenge that a little bit, right? Because I remember I don't know what grade it was. I think it was fifth grade. We did a big field trip out to a huge park. It was like the end of fifth grade, end of elementary school. And we were doing different exercises, and one group of us had to make a shelter, right? And we made a lean-to. Had a lot of fun with it. It was great. Right, so we could live in a lean-to, right? So what's it that pushes us to build a house with doors and windows? Is it just shelter? Or is it because we saw that our neighbor across the street has a bigger lean-to?
That may pertain to certain people, but I don't know whether that was how much of a factor that was, hundreds, thousands of years ago. And I think the setting that you gave for your own example may have been a setup for competitive spirit. And in fact, that may have been part of the exercise. Who can erect the lean-to first.
Oh, actually, we were the only ones who made the lean-to, but I know what you mean. Like, it could have been. It wasn't that, but
yeah, and I think the other issue is also to the extent that people are living together. I think if you're somewhat isolated, that issue of competition is not as dominant. I think as I said, I don't think it's totally untrue. I think it's probably mostly true, especially today, in today's society. But I think circumstances may determine whether it's true or not true.
And wisdom literature will tend to kind of make broader statements, right? So we can go ahead.
Oh, this is such an interesting discussion, as all discussions here always are, but it reminds me so much of spirited debates that I used to hear when I was much younger about capitalism versus socialism. And the capitalists seem to assume that people won't do anything unless, they're big advocates of competitiveness, competition, improving things, whereas the socialists seem to think that people were had more altruistic motivations. And to this day, I think I still wonder. I still wonder about the whole thing. It's a very interesting question.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's not. I think that's a good thing to point out, right? That it's not simplistic. It's not all or nothing. It's not one way or no way, right? It's what we're trying to do here is get into what is this thing, and in Hebrew, I want us to pick up on it. There's a word which I'm going to highlight here. If you can everybody see that highlighted? Mm-hmm. Except that now it opens this other thing. Hold on. Why did it go there? I don't know. And why is it? Okay, hold on. Really? Okay, hold on. And wait, if it takes me a minute, I can just oh, here we go. So it is side by side English Hebrew. Okay. There we go. Okay. So
Where is it?
here, this word, if you see in the Hebrew that I highlight, Okay, I'm not sure why it keeps doing that. But if it's going to keep doing that, I'm not going to pretend it won't. It's the word yetzer, which means inclination. And there's a yetzer hatov, and there's a yetzer hara. And that's kind of what we want to pick up on here, is that we have an inclination towards good and an inclination towards bad, according to the very literal translation. But
They might just leave you out there.
according to the literal translation, I will not highlight the word again, but I will move the cursor over it. Oh, it's a different one. Here we go. Okay, so here we have. If you look at, can you see the cursor moving back and forth?
Yes.
Okay, so that word yetzer, and then tov. Yetzer tov is the good inclination, and then down here, yetzer ra is the bad inclination, the evil inclination. But as we were noticing, it's not so simple, right? And we shouldn't call the yetzer tov good like on its own, and we shouldn't call the yetzer ra evil completely. And I think, Carla, you gave a really kind of a good transition point here, which if we were going to compare, like, let's just compare for a moment. Let's say socialism is, and I don't take this as a political statement, but let's say socialism is yetzer tov. It's a good inclination because it represents sharing and non-competition and doing our part and just taking only what we need. Okay? And let's say yetzer ra is capitalism, meaning it's and when I say capitalism, I mean pure capitalism, unadulterated, unregulated, just 100% completely, everything determined by markets, right? Which doesn't take humanity really into account, right? And is all about, get what I can get while I can get it. So
you have to use other people to get it.
And you have to use other people to get it, exactly, right? And so we can see how that can be, how one could,
Where socialism is geared to making sure the other person has what you have, or vice versa.
Yes, but it can also lead to kind of universalism, where it says where there's no differentiation whatsoever between people, right?
Yeah, they tried this in the kibbutz, but it didn't work.
Yeah, no, it did not work, and I think we can see that. We can see that one without the other leads to, I would propose, probably leads to disaster. Right? Capitalism without any type of socialism or any type of social responsibility would lead to the consumption and destruction of the world. And socialism's problem, I forget who said this. I don't know if it was Chamberlain or not. Not Chamberlain, if it was Prime Minister of England during World War II.
Churchill.
Churchill, thank you. Different Churchill, very different than Chamberlain. That the challenge of socialism is when you run out of spending other people's money, something along those lines, right? Which I think is a bit.
It was Margaret Thatcher.
That's Thatcher? Oh, yeah. Well,
It's Thatcher.
Yeah. So even Yeah, harsher there. So, and I'm not saying that I don't agree with that statement uh, in its entirety, right? But again, there's truth in both sides that if you take them at their purest form, they don't really. What's the challenge of taking either one in their purest form?
They assume humans are perfect individuals.
Right, yeah, Hillary. So they assume that we operate perfectly in one way or another, right? And whereas, and that's why those are political or economic philosophies, whereas religion recognizes that human beings are imperfect, right? So that's one of the ways that this is really interesting is that we're seeing these two different inclinations, either one of which on its own would probably be not helpful or would be destructive. Well, maybe not destructive, but one more certainly the Yetzer Hara is more destructive than the Yetzer Tov. But we do our best when we have both in some sort of balance with one another. Okay, and that's what we're going to get to now. So so you can see how that's why in this teaching it says that without the Yetzer Hara, right, people would not build houses, they wouldn't get married, and they wouldn't have children. Right? Because if it was just the Yetzer Tov, we'd only be concerned with
Getting our needs met.
yeah. So how does that interfere with having children or building a house or getting married?
It removes the struggle. To have children and get married, you have to struggle.
Yeah. And why do we do those? Why do we engage in those struggles?
Because our desire is we want it.
Yeah, but is what we want what we're getting in the moment?
Is it in the moment?
Right? Is the satisfaction of the moment, or is it about the future?
It's future.
Right? It's what we're building towards.
Yes.
Right? So that's, I think, one of the things that it points out, right, is that that drive enables us to subsume the momentary unhappiness or displeasure of hard work, sweat, or sacrifice for a future.
Right.
Whereas the Yetzer Tov would be more concerned with equanimity in the moment. Right? Being happy in the moment. So I'll do whatever I need to get by, and that's it. Right? So can you imagine a character from a movie or a book that represents the Yetzer Tov really well? Or the Yetzer Hara. I mean, I think the Yetzer Tov, the reference that comes to my mind, is not one that's going to necessarily resonate with all of you. I think it's a bit of a generational movie. I don't know have you ever seen The Big Lebowski? Anyone?
I love that movie.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So the lead character, the dude, in the movie, he kind of is the Yetzer Tov. It's just like get by, like what's in the moment, and don't worry about like anything else. And it's only when he starts to worry about this carpet. It's a long story. You got to see the whole movie. It's only when he starts to worry about something that his life goes into turmoil, right? But we've seen in that movie, that kind of movie is I think, or that kind of character is not a staple of the American American culture, right? Our pop culture and our literature tends to be dominated more by people whose Yetzer Hara has gone off the deep end, and to see through what and to read about the repercussions, right? The Great Gatsby. No, was it No Country for Old Men? The one about that's not the one. The one about oil that was made about 10 or 12 years ago. Do you remember that one where it's who's that actor? My head's not going there, but like where people strive for material success because they think it's going to lead them to something else, but they destroy that other thing in the drive for material success. Right? That's a theme that we see over and over again in America, in American cinema and American literature. And The Big Lebowski is kind of an exception because it celebrates the person who doesn't go for the for that kind of material success and kind of what happens to him. Okay, that was just a little aside. Let's get to the actual text of Ben Zoma. Okay. Okay. Everybody there?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so Don Murinson, you're the next on my screen. Would you read for us the second box, the third box, but the second teaching?
The third by who is rich?
Who is well? The first box is kind of narrow, right? It just says Ben Zoma teaches, but then who is mighty?
Who is mighty? Who is mighty? One who subdues his or her material inclination, as it is written, better to be forbearing than mighty, to have self-control than to conquer a city.
Okay, he's pithy, right? He's right to the point. But you're looking quizzically at the screen, Don. So does that betray some questioning about the text?
One is always trying to question the text here.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, I mean, what you want me to put this in my own words, or what are you asking? I'm not sure.
Put in your own words.
Well, I think we're again talking about the negative side, I guess, of our whatever drives us. I guess that's what the word inclination means.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever sort of the not so much reasoning necessarily, but our inclination, whatever our instincts are, I guess, some of which are good, some of which are bad. So
yep.
This is sort of saying, I don't know about subdues, but maybe who has one's, and I think by material, I think they're referring to the not so good part of our instincts, perhaps.
Yeah.
And subdues. So I don't know if I would agree with the word subdues, but at least I think what it's saying is controls. Who has some sense of control is something supratentorial, perhaps something cerebral from the shoulders up that has control over our tendencies, our instincts to do things that aren't so nice or good. And basically it is saying that, I guess the word forbearing here means that process that I've just described, where we have some control of it, than mighty, okay? So we're answering the question with the same word. Who is mighty? and they're saying mighty. So they're not exactly defining what they mean by mighty here. That is puzzling. Should I keep going, or should I be quiet at this point?
No, these are some really good points.
Um,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So who is mighty? Well, those who are mighty. I don't know. It's a little confusing.
Right. It's better to be forbearing than to be mighty.
Yeah, but the question is, who is mighty? So
Well,
they're answering the question with the same word that they're asking. Okay.
What is one answer that's given by the proverb? It's the verb, the verse from Proverbs.
You're talking about the last sentence?
Well, so this is often the form of the Torah or the Bible, that it has like a structure to it, right? So we have A, B, and then A1, B1, right? So A is better to be forbearing, and B is then mighty, and then Umoshel Barucho is A1, to have self-control, which is forbearing, then to conquer a city, which would be B1, right? So that would match up with Gibor. So that's kind of one way to approach it would be, that's the definition of what it means to be mighty. So I take your...
So they're equating mighty with conquering a city.
Yes. Right. So what kind of might is that? That's physical might, right? Power.
Right.
And also, when you're conquering a city, what are you subduing?
Killing.
Well, you're killing, but let's just say you conquer a city by surrounding it and not killing anyone miraculously.
But the other concept here, I mean, when you're talking about conquering a city, you're not talking about yourself. You're talking really about having an army.
Exactly. Well, and also about conquering, but about subduing other people.
Well,
right?
The idea of mighty also is mighty. The idea is that you're controlling other people to do, to carry out a purpose here, which conquering a city. I mean, I'm not sure necessarily that I think that's.
You give an example, like a basketball team. You may have a player who can make tremendous baskets.
Yep.
But it doesn't involve the team. And so he has to cool it in order to let the team become the hero rather than just him.
Yeah, what did Eisenhower say? That's been quoted up there on Facebook all the time now. You can get anything accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit.
Right.
So here, I think one of the things that
he elevates the other people.
Yes. Elevates the other people, right? So I want to point out a couple things, and I think everyone's raised some really good issues. I was just going to suggest that, right, they're saying being mighty means you subdue yourself, your own inclination, not being mighty means subduing other people, right, or controlling other people. Right. Now, this is the ultimate example in terms of political violence or the military, but you get the same thing from markets or from political power. There are lots of environments where that's true, right, where we could pursue that as a truth. But I want to pull back for a moment because we want to understand kind of where Rabbi Ben-Zoma is coming from and how this could be, what this could be related to in other areas, which are really kind of could be profound as well. And I think then inform the conversation that we're having right now. So the first thing is that when we looked at that midrash and it talked about yetzer or inclination, was it singular or plural?
Plural.
It was plural, right? There was a yetzer tov and a yetzer ra. Now, that midrash is a later text in Zoma, most likely. Midrash Rabbah on Bereshit is an earlier midrash, but midrash is generally a later literature than Pirkei Avot, and Ben-Zoma is in the 2nd century of the Common Era. So it might be around the same time, or he might be speaking a bit before the teaching that we read earlier. But he says who is mighty? One who conquers. And the text here says his inclination. I changed it to make it gender equal, right? But he's saying, so let's go with ones. Who is mighty? One who conquers one's inclination. Not both of them, but one. So that's two possibilities, right? One is they're only talking about one inclination. The other is, right, so there's either a Yetzer HaTov or a Yetzer Hara, and you have to master it, which is not the same kind of construct as having a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra, right? So it's a little bit more simple. That'd be one possibility. Another possibility is that what Ben Zoma is saying is you don't have to really conquer your Yetzer Tov, I would suggest. The only thing you need to conquer is your Yetzer Ra. Right? We want to have our Yetzer Tov. Most of the time, we have to inspire it and encourage it and nourish it. It's the Yetzer Hara that we need to find a way to subdue or to limit. Right? Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. But what I want to point out also, because this will be really interesting for Jewish people in prayer, are the first two words. Ezahu Gibor, who is mighty. Okay? And the reason why I want to point that out is because that word is really important when it comes to a kind of a Jewish, or at least a prayer conception of God,
Almighty God.
right?
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
So this is the second paragraph of the Amidah. Okay, that's boom, 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 boom. There we go. So this is the second paragraph of the Amidah, right? Where we begin, Ata Gibor. You are mighty, O Lord. So we're calling God mighty.
Right.
Gibor, right?
Right.
Now, what's interesting is how is God's might expressed in our world? Now, we could go through many different theological streams and teachings throughout time in Judaism, but I don't want to bring ones that are coming from like 800 and 1,000 years after Ben Zoma. So Ben Zoma is coming around and living at a time when these words are being written, right? When the Amidah is becoming a central piece of rabbinic Judaism, because the temple has been destroyed now for the past 70 years, right? So they create the Amidah and they create prayer in that time frame as a way of connecting with God. So here we say that you are mighty forever, O Lord. You revive. So one is you revive the dead, you are mighty to save. Okay. But then we continue on. Right? So how is God mighty? God is mighty by sustaining the living with loving kindness. By reviving the dead to life with great mercy. And there's a lot of room for interpretation of what that means. Right? God is mighty by supporting the fallen and by healing the sick, by freeing captives, right, and preserving your faith with those who sleep in the dust. So when we talk about God being mighty, what are the ways that we see? We see all these really positive things. And things that when we associate them with human action, would you connect these with our Yetzer Tov or our Yetzer Ra?
Yetzer Tov.
Our Yetzer Tov, right? Our good inclination. These are things that we have to inspire ourselves to do. And these are things that we're saying God is mighty for doing in our world. right? So I think that there's some, and I don't know exactly what it is, but I can't help but think that in answering the question, Ezehu Gibor, who is mighty in our world, that Ben Zoma had this paragraph in mind, which begins, Ata Gibor, God, you are mighty, right? Um, and then Ben Zoma answers it by saying, human beings are mighty when we conquer or control our Yetzer Hara. Is that, have I left you all confused? Should I go to the next step, or is this, or too esoteric?
The desire to be number one, when we conquer that.
It
Well,
makes
yeah, go ahead,
oh,
Carl.
it makes me think of the healthcare workers and all those people who are working behind the scenes and keeping our world running, and they're mighty, even though they're not mighty.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly how I teach this text. Not even just how I teach it, but how I think of it every morning and every afternoon and every evening when I say it as part of my davening, a part of my praying. This is the second paragraph of the Amidah. In the first paragraph, we talk about the first Jewish people, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. And I talk about that paragraph as telling us who we are, right? If we're Jews who are saying these prayers, that means that we're in a spiritual chain that goes all the way back to these ancestors we talk about in the book of Genesis. And here, in the second paragraph, that begins, Ata Gibor, God, you are mighty, we're telling ourselves what our job is in this world, right? Which is that we don't pray for God to do things in the world. We pray so that we can bring God into the world by our actions and inspire ourselves,
Right.
right? And so when we say Ata Gibor, God, you are mighty, we're trying to inspire ourselves to take on these actions, right? To do all those things that we just read through, which I think we all think are good things. And Carla, like that's exactly that's exactly what I teach as well. We can look at these as careers also, right? If you look at those tasks as careers, you've got doctors, we have judges, we have social workers, we have all kinds of people who care for other people, right, in society. And those are the people, that's mighty, right? To conquer our inclination to rule over others, but to be more godlike and to be more inspired in that way to care for others and to bring those actions about in the world that make it a more just and a more caring place.
And they're more concerned about saving you than themselves.
Yeah, often true.
Hey. Yeah, I'm on.
No. So if presenting it this way, then our inclination is kind of, in some ways, the inverse of God. I don't know. Maybe. Is that how it comes across or not?
Well, maybe what is our inclination? I mean, you say, is it both? We may have the good inclination, and that I lost it, but it's not the inverse of God. It's
No.
sharing that attribute
With God.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
I think one of our inclinations.
Today on order for your representatives to appear on driving while licensed road not in their driving application. 4 days a week.
Okay.
Well, one of the things that this virus has brought out is that we look at our firemen, as, really doing a good job. Not firemen, but
Doctors, nurses,
what do you call it?
EMTs.
oh, EMTs.
Yeah. And as one man shared, one EMT, his life is on the line, picking up people and doing all this. And he has no
Healthcare.
no health insurance himself.
Yeah.
That is not included in his wages. And our congressmen who are not putting themselves on the line are all insured for their life and for all their family.
Yeah.
And for all the relatives, it seems like. Yeah. So I think it's kind of bringing out this, we're suddenly saying, the baggers, the people who are giving giving us our food, and all of those are very important people.
Essential.
But essential. And they're not, but they are the lowest paid. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's interesting to our society. If we didn't have them, we would be, if we didn't have the people who empty the bedpans, the nursing homes would be in dire straits.
Yeah.
But they're the lowest paid. So I think that's interesting.
Indeed. Do you, well, what would society look like if we really celebrated as mighty people who are able to control their inclinations?
Well, I look at the Isaiah prophecy, which says each person would have their own fig tree, and which means all of their needs would be met.
Yeah.
And they would have a place that would be special to them. There's a uniqueness there that and they are depending on God basically for their provisions. When they say the fig tree and the vine, things like that. That's a thought.
Well, what does it say that that football has taken over from baseball as the most popular sport in America to watch?
It's violence.
It's replaced boxing.
Oh, replace boxing, yeah.
Yeah, boxing used to be, I think, one of the most popular sports.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Yeah.
Baseball was popular, but I remember when we used to have boxing on every Friday night.
Oh,
When
yeah.
I was a little kid growing up. It was
Yeah.
a big thing, boxing.
Yeah, boxing was a big thing for us too.
I don't know if it superseded baseball, but but football certainly is a little bit more socially acceptable violence. For now, I think the future of football remains unclear, as the harm that is being done is being better recognized, as happened with boxing, when people were dying from being pummeled.
From the injuries. Although we see that boxing's being dominated now by mixed martial arts.
Yeah, true.
MMA.
I think what it says is our entertainment is more important than the person who's entertaining us.
Okay, Francis, can you say that again?
Our entertainment is more important than the person or persons who's entertaining
us. Okay.
In other words, we're above what the participants are.
Yeah, we don't care if they get a.
Yeah, we care more about being entertained than what happens to them.
Right. Right.
It's bread and circus.
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It is. And we
Yeah,
see that on all levels,
right.
for sure.
Well, it really goes back to the days of the gladiators, really, isn't it? I mean, especially football, and maybe to some extent boxing. I mean, it really is very reminiscent of, the days of the gladiators, except this is supposedly a little bit more civilized.
Yeah, but not anymore. Yeah.
Well, when I was growing up, football was considered a team sport and you could win or lose. But now, if you're a team, you must win at all cost.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Well, actually, one of the great battles in rabbinic Judaism in its early days, even before there's such a thing as rabbinic Judaism, is with Greek culture. And the culture, now some of that's like things that we really respect, like the like philosophy. But other things has to do with the culture of the gymnasium and the culture of the the place where gladiators would battle,
Coliseum.
in the culture of the Colosseum, that they were
Expendable.
rebelling against, and we can see here one of the reasons why. Great. Well, everybody, great discussion today. As you can see, each one of these is really
Thank you.
the next one is who is rich, as the who Ashir, and you can see that each of these is very rich, right? They're very interesting teachings to get into and deep.
Yes.
And so Ben Zoma did a good job. We're still contemplating his words 2,000 years later, trying to live up to them. So next week we'll get together and talk about Ezehu Ashir, and hope you'll join us tonight at 7 p.m. We're having a community celebration of Israel's Independence Day, starting at 7 o'clock. So it should be a nice little ceremony, but also I'll be interviewing 3 different people who have with very different connections to Israel, and kind of talking about how they are inspired by that and how it maintains them and what it means to them today. So I think should be an interesting conversation.
Very good.
But everyone, great day, everyone. Looks like it's beautiful, so hopefully everyone gets outside for a little bit, even if you have to wear a mask. But enjoy the sun.
Okay.
Shalom.
Thank you.
Shalom.
That was